Picture an ancient civilization so brilliant, so inventive, that their ideas still shape our world today, yet their name rarely gets the recognition it deserves. The Phoenicians weren't just traders sailing the Mediterranean in their iconic purple-dyed sails. They were the hidden architects of progress, the quiet geniuses whose innovations laid the groundwork for everything from modern writing to global commerce. While Egypt built pyramids and Greece philosophized, these master craftsmen were quietly revolutionizing daily life with inventions so ahead of their time, you'll wonder how history ever forgot to give them center stage. Think about the last time you sent a text or withdrew cash from an ATM. Believe it or not, you have the Phoenicians to thank for the roots of both. This seafaring society didn't just trade goods, they traded ideas, spreading breakthroughs across continents like whispers on the wind. Their creations weren't just practical, they were transformative, stitching together the fabric of ancient civilizations and leaving a legacy that echoes in ways we barely stop to notice. From the alphabet in your pocket to the coins in your wallet, their fingerprints are everywhere once you know where to look. So let's set sail on a journey to uncover 30 of their most astonishing inventions, each one a testament to human ingenuity. You'll discover how they turned sea snails into royal purple dye worth its weight in gold, how their shipbuilding techniques outsmarted the fiercest storms, and why their version of fast food kept empires fed. This isn't just a list, it's a rediscovery of the minds who made the ancient world modern, ready to meet the unsung heroes behind the scenes of history. Their story starts now. Before ink touched parchment or stylus carved wax, humanity struggled under the weight of cumbersome writing systems, clay tablets etched in cuneiform, stone monuments laboriously chiseled with hieroglyphs. Then came the Phoenicians, who stripped writing down to its elegant essence. Their breakthrough wasn't just a set of symbols, it was liberation. Imagine condensing hundreds of complex pictographs into just 22 simple characters, each representing a consonant sound. Suddenly, merchants could record transactions on lightweight papyrus instead of bulky clay. Sailors carried contracts in their pockets rather than lugging stone tablets across the sea. This was the democratization of knowledge, and it spread like wildfire along their trade routes. What made their alphabet revolutionary wasn't just its simplicity, it was its adaptability. Unlike rigid hieroglyphs tied to specific words, these letters could be rearranged like building blocks to form any word in any language. Greek traders in Crete adopted it, adding vowels to suit their tongue. The Etruscans borrowed it, passing it to the Romans, whose script would eventually evolve into the Latin alphabet we use today. Even Hebrew and Arabic scripts trace their roots back to those Phoenician symbols scratched onto shards of pottery. But here's the twist, the Phoenicians didn't just invent letters, they weaponized efficiency. A scribe could learn their alphabet in days instead of years, unlocking literacy for bureaucrats, shopkeepers, and sailors alike. That purple dye merchant in Tyre, he could now jot down orders from Athens without hiring a temple scribe. The ripple effect was monumental, faster treaties, precise inventories, and poetry that could travel farther than ever before. Their letters didn't just record history, they accelerated it, turning the Mediterranean into a bustling network of shared ideas. And somewhere in your phone's keyboard right now, those 22 shapes live on, still connecting minds across millennia. Now picture a color so rare, so intoxicating, that wearing it could land you in prison or on a throne. Tyrian purple wasn't just a dye, it was power distilled into liquid form. The Phoenicians' secret, a humble sea snail, the murex, whose glands held a treasure more valuable than gold. Harvesting it was a nightmare of precision. Tens of thousands of snails had to be crushed, their glands fermented in vats for days under the Mediterranean sun, producing a stench so foul that dye workshops were banished to the outskirts of cities. But the result, a crimson-soaked violet that deepened with age, never fading, a color that screamed, "I answer to no one." emperors and kings became addicts to this chromatic status symbol. Roman rulers like Nero decreed that only they could wear Tyrian purple robes, executing anyone bold enough to mimic them. Byzantine emperors signed documents with ink made from it, sealing their words in luxury. Even Cleopatra, no stranger to opulence, draped her sails in the stuff just to show off as she sailed into Rome. But here's the twist: the Phoenicians didn't just sell the dye, they weaponized scarcity. By keeping the extraction process a state secret, they turned coastal cities like Tyre into economic powerhouses. 1 pound of pure dye cost the equivalent of a Roman soldier's yearly salary, funding fleets and fortresses with what amounted to liquefied influence. The true genius wasn't just in the dye itself, but in the monopoly they built. Phoenician traders sold pre-dyed fabrics rather than the recipe, creating an irreversible dependency. When Julius Caesar entered Rome in triumph, his purple cloak wasn't just fabric. It was a billboard advertising Phoenician craftsmanship. For over 1,000 years, this color bankrolled empires, funded wars, and draped the corridors of power. And hidden in every thread, the silent arrogance of a civilization that knew some luxuries can't be replicated, only coveted. Take a substance as fragile as sand and transform it into something that could hold empires together. That was the Phoenician alchemy of glass blowing. While ancient cultures had created crude glass for centuries, it was these coastal innovators who perfected the art of transparency. Their workshops along the Levant coast didn't just produce beads or trinkets. They engineered a material so clear it could mimic water, so durable it survived shipwrecks, and so versatile it became the secret weapon of trade. The key: a blend of local sand rich in silica, a dash of natron from Egyptian salt flats, and furnace temperatures hot enough to liquefy stone. What emerged from those fires wasn't just glass, it was liquid light harnessed into form. Walk through the ruins of Sidon today, and you'll stumble upon shards of their legacy. Delicate perfume bottles shaped like pomegranates, mosaic tiles flashing cobalt and gold, even slender drinking vessels so thin they shimmer like dragonfly wings. These weren't mass-produced goods. Each piece was a marvel of engineering. Phoenician craftsmen used hollow metal tubes to blow molten glass into symmetrical shapes, a technique so advanced that Rome would later kidnap their artisans to replicate it. Archaeologists still marvel at intact vessels pulled from Mediterranean shipwrecks, flasks that once held myrrh for Egyptian priests or wine for Assyrian nobles, their surfaces etched with patterns that catch sunlight after 2,000 years in the dark. But the real power lay in their trade strategy. Unlike Tyrian purple, glass was a democratized luxury. Wealthy elites commissioned stained glass windows for palaces, while fishermen's wives saved coins for tiny vials of rose-scented oil. The Phoenicians didn't just sell glass, they sold aspiration, packaging everything from cosmetics to spices in containers that turned everyday items into treasures. When a Greek merchant uncorked a vial of Phoenician glass holding incense, he wasn't just buying fragrance, he was buying into an identity. And when Roman architects later used glass for grand bathhouse windows, they were standing on the shoulders of craftsmen who turned beach sand into the ancient world's closest thing to magic. While merchant ships plied the Mediterranean with goods, the Phoenicians built a vessel that would dominate the waves, not with brute strength, but with terrifying precision. The Bireme wasn't just a ship, it was a symphony of naval engineering. Its twin banks of oars slicing through water like a predator's double row of teeth. Picture a hull so slender it could chase down pirate skiffs, yet sturdy enough to ram enemy vessels with bone-crushing force. The secret: a revolutionary design that stacked oarsmen on 2 levels, packing twice the manpower into half the space. Where single-decked ships lumbered like oxen, biremes danced like swordfish, able to pivot on a coin, outflank slower foes, or vanish into coastal shallows where heavier ships ran aground. But speed wasn't their only weapon. Phoenician shipwrights reinforced prows with bronze rams, turning the ships into underwater battering rams. At the Battle of Salamis, these tactics became legendary. Biremes would feign retreat, luring enemy fleets into tight channels before wheeling around to smash their hulls from the side. Greek admirals studied these maneuvers obsessively, later adopting the design for their own triremes. Even Rome's mighty navy owed its early victories to captured Phoenician biremes, their blue-painted hulls repurposed for conquest. Yet warfare was only half the story. These ships were the Swiss army knives of antiquity. By day, their holds brimmed with amphorae of wine and cedar logs bound for Egypt. By night, oars muffled, they became ghostly raiders slipping past blockades. The same vessel that delivered Tyrian purple to Persian kings could transform into a floating fortress at a moment's notice. And when Carthage, a Phoenician colony, faced Rome in the Punic Wars, it was biremes that nearly turned the tide, proving their design remained unmatched for centuries. Today's naval historians still marvel at how these wooden sharks rewrote the rules of engagement, turning the Mediterranean into a chessboard where the Phoenicians always moved first. Early sailors faced a terrifying truth. Their anchors were little more than glorified rocks tied to ropes. When storms hit, these stone weights would drag helplessly across the seafloor, offering no more resistance than a pebble skipping over ice. Then came the Phoenicians, who looked at this ancient problem and saw an opportunity for reinvention. Their solution, a wooden anchor armed with metal teeth, a design so effective it still echoed in modern marinas today. Picture the genius of this transformation. Instead of relying on sheer weight, Phoenician shipwrights carved wooden anchors with curved arms tipped in bronze. When dropped, these arms would dig into the seabed like claws, gripping sand or rock with relentless tenacity. Even more ingenious was the stock, a crossbar near the top that ensured the anchor always landed sideways, forcing those metal teeth to engage. Suddenly, a merchant ship could weather a squall without being dashed against cliffs, or pause mid-voyage to trade without drifting onto reefs. The difference was like trading a feather for a grappling hook. But the real breakthrough was in trade efficiency. With reliable anchors, Phoenician ships could linger safely in deeper waters, opening ports previously deemed too risky. No longer confined to shallow bays, their vessels could load cedar logs from steep Levantine coasts or unload Egyptian grain near Nile Delta channels too turbulent for lesser ships. This wasn't just about safety, it was about controlling the rhythm of commerce itself. While competitors scrambled to find sheltered coves, Phoenician captains dropped anchor wherever profits beckoned, turning open waters into floating warehouses. Centuries later, divers off the coast of Malta found one of these anchors wedged between rocks, its wooden core long gone but bronze teeth still snarling upward as if ready to grip. That stubborn defiance mirrors its legacy. The fluke-shaped designs on modern yacht anchors trace their lineage directly back to those Phoenician innovators. Even the word anchor itself may derive from their language, a linguistic relic of the day humanity stopped praying the wind would spare them and started trusting metal to hold fast instead. High in the mountains of Lebanon, forests of cedar stretched toward the sky, trees so towering and straight they seemed carved by the gods themselves. The Phoenicians didn't just harvest these giants, they unlocked their potential, turning aromatic timber into the backbone of a maritime empire. Unlike ordinary wood that warped and splintered in salt water, cedar resisted rot with an almost supernatural stubbornness. Its resin-infused fibers repelled shipworms, while its natural oils kept hulls from cracking under the Mediterranean sun. But the real magic lay in the grain, lightweight yet unyielding, allowing ships to glide faster while carrying heavier loads. A Phoenician merchant vessel built from cedar could outlast 3 generations of sailors, its ribs groaning with the weight of history. The demand for this floating gold was insatiable. Egyptian pharaohs sent envoys begging for logs to roof temples, while Babylonian kings wrote cuneiform letters complaining about delayed shipments. One surviving papyrus from Pharaoh Sneferu's reign boasts of 40 ships laden with cedar arriving at the Nile, each log hand-selected for length and fragrance. The Phoenicians, ever the shrewd traders, turned this desperation into leverage. They didn't just sell wood, they sold prestige. When King Hiram of Tyre supplied Solomon with cedar for Jerusalem's temple, the deal included Phoenician craftsmen to carve the wood into sacred panels, ensuring no one else could replicate the artistry. But the true testament to cedar's value lay in its ecological cost. By the time Rome rose to power, Lebanon's slopes were nearly bare, stripped clean by generations of relentless logging. The very ships that built Phoenicia's wealth had consumed the forests that birthed them, a cautionary tale woven into the rings of the few surviving ancient cedars. Modern dendrochronologists can still trace this deforestation in climate records, finding gaps where rainfall patterns shifted after the trees vanished. Today, walking through Lebanon's protected cedar groves feels like stepping into a living archive, where the scent of resin carries whispers of ships that once ruled the waves. And somewhere beneath the Mediterranean surface, shipwrecks with cedar hulls endure as waterlogged ghosts of the world's first global supply chain. Long before GPS or satellite maps, the Phoenicians charted a web of trade routes so vast it stitched together 3 continents. Their ships didn't just hug the coastline. They braved open waters with a navigational precision that turned the Mediterranean into a highway. From the tin mines of Cornwall to the ivory markets of West Africa, their routes formed history's first global supply chain, with bustling ports like Carthage and Gadea, modern-day Cadiz, serving as ancient versions of shipping hubs like Singapore or Rotterdam. What set these routes apart wasn't just their reach, but their ruthless efficiency. Phoenician captains relied on celestial navigation, using the North Star to plot courses even on moonless nights. They established way stations at precise intervals, places like Motia in Sicily or Lixus in Morocco, where ships could resupply without veering off course. These weren't random stops, they were calculated nodes in a network, spaced precisely to match a ship's average range before needing fresh water or repairs. Imagine a 5th century BCE version of modern logistics algorithms, optimized for wind patterns and currents. Carthage became the crown jewel of this system. Founded as a colony, it grew into a metropolis where Egyptian linen met Spanish silver and British tin. Its circular harbor, with concentric rings of docks, could service hundreds of ships simultaneously, a feat of engineering Rome would later mimic at Ostia. But the real power lay in standardization. Phoenician merchants used uniform weights, measures, and contracts across ports, creating a trust system that let a trader from Tyre do business in Sardinia without haggling over every ounce. This wasn't just commerce, it was the birth of a proto-global economy, where a merchant in Cyprus could order Gaulish honey with the same ease we now click "buy now" online. Yet their boldest voyage was the African circumnavigation commissioned by Egyptian pharaoh Necho Roman II around 600 BCE. Phoenician sailors allegedly spent 3 years sailing clockwise around the continent, past the Horn of Africa's monsoons, the Congo's mangrove swamps, and the treacherous currents of the Cape, returning through the Pillars of Hercules Gibraltar with their holds full of exotic pelts and gold dust. While historians debate the details, the sheer audacity captures their ethos. No horizon was too distant, no prophet too obscure. The legacy, today's shipping lanes still trace many of their paths. The Strait of Gibraltar remains one of the world's busiest waterways, and ports like Marseille began as Phoenician trading posts. Even the word tariff derives from the Phoenician port of Tarifa, where fees were first standardized. Their network didn't just move goods, it dissolved borders, making the ancient world feel smaller, faster, and more connected. Every time a modern cargo ship follows their wake, it sails in the shadow of those purple-sailed pioneers who taught humanity how to shrink an ocean. Before coins, trade was a cacophony of chaos, a merchant haggling over sacks of grain for a bolt of linen, another bartering silver rings for olive oil. each transaction bogged down by the weight of uneven values. The Phoenicians cut through this noise with a stroke of genius standardized coinage. Their invention wasn't just metal with a fancy stamp. It was the world's first universal language of value, transforming commerce from a tangled web of negotiations into a smooth, predictable exchange. At the heart of this system was the shekel, a small, consistent weight of silver that became the dollar of the ancient Mediterranean. Unlike irregular lumps of precious metal, each shekel bore the mark of its city, guaranteeing its purity and weight. A trader in Sidon could now hand over coins stamped with the image of a galley, knowing they'd be accepted in Cyprus or Crete without a second thought. This was trust minted into physical form. The shift was seismic. Suddenly, prices could be fixed, debts recorded, and wages paid without hauling scales to every marketplace. But the real innovation lay in how the shekel transcended economics. These coins carried cultural fingerprints. Tyrian shekels featured the god Melkart, while Byblos issues displayed sacred bulls. They weren't just currency, they were miniature ambassadors spreading Phoenician iconography wherever trade winds blew. Even the word shekel embedded itself into history, surviving in Hebrew scripture and modern Israeli currency. When Judas Iscariot was paid 30 pieces of silver, those were likely Tyrian shekels, their reputation for reliability lasting centuries after Phoenicia's decline. The contrast with barter was staggering. Where a farmer might once argue over how many chickens equaled a bronze dagger, coins introduced cold, hard math. Phoenician merchants could now calculate profits across continents, converting Egyptian wheat into silver, then silver into Spanish tin with ruthless precision. This was capitalism's prototype, and its efficiency birthed new professions. Moneychangers set up tables near temples, while bankers in used shekel weights to issue the world's earliest known loans. Archaeologists still dig up hoards of these coins, some melted by invaders, others carefully buried by merchants who never returned. Each tarnished disc tells a story of connectivity, proving that even empires rise and fall. The idea of standardized value endures. Today, when you tap your phone to pay for coffee, you're executing a transaction that traces its DNA straight back to those Phoenician silver pieces, proof that some revolutions begin not with a war cry, but with the quiet clink of metal on a marketplace table. Under a canopy of stars on the open sea, Phoenician navigators held a secret weapon, one that turned the night sky into a celestial roadmap centuries before the Greeks refined it. Their astrolabe wasn't the ornate brass instrument of medieval scholars. It was a rugged, palm-sized disc of wood or bronze, etched with markers for key constellations. Picture a captain steadying himself against the roll of waves, aligning the disc with Polaris to gauge latitude, or measuring the angle of the sun at noon to confirm his ship's position. This was no mere guessing game. It was precision engineering in an era when most cultures still navigated by folklore and coastal landmarks. What made their version revolutionary was its adaptability. Unlike later Greek models cluttered with zodiac symbols, Phoenician astrolabes focused purely on utility. Sailors could adjust for seasonal star shifts by rotating simple overlays, a feature that let them traverse unfamiliar waters with shocking accuracy. During their alleged circumnavigation of Africa, these tools would have been indispensable. Imagine rounding the Cape of Good Hope without charts, relying instead on the Southern Cross, a constellation unseen in Mediterranean skies, to guide the way. The astrolabe transformed celestial patterns into a universal coordinate system, turning the heavens into a compass that worked even when storms obscured the horizon. But the real brilliance lay in its democratization of exploration. With this tool, any competent navigator, not just priest astronomers, could venture beyond sight of land. Surviving accounts describe Phoenician ships reaching as far north as Britain's tin mines and as far south as West Africa's gold-rich rivers, routes that would have been unthinkable without celestial reckoning. Modern experiments recreate these voyages using replica astrolabes, proving they could achieve fixes within 30 nautical miles, a margin of error that put entire coastlines within reach. The astrolabe's legacy outlasted its creators. Arab scholars later refined it into the ornate, universal instrument of the Islamic Golden Age, and medieval European navigators clung to its principles until the sextant's invention. Yet every time a sailor squinted at the stars through a calibrated ring, they echoed those Phoenician pioneers who first dared to sail not just by the whims of the wind, but by the cold, calculable logic of the cosmos. Buried in that simple disk was a quiet rebellion, the belief that even the gods' lights could be harnessed to serve human ambition. Documents signed in Tyrian purple ink carried more than royal decrees, they bore the unyielding permanence of power itself. While most ancient inks faded to ghosts over centuries, Phoenician scribes wielded a formula steeped in the same murex dye that colored emperors' robes. This wasn't just pigment, it was chemistry harnessed to defy time. Crushed snail glands mixed with vinegar and iron salts created an ink that bonded chemically to parchment, resisting sunlight, moisture, and even deliberate scraping. When King Hiram of Tyre stamped treaties with Egypt, he knew his words would outlast the stone tablets they were written on. Examine a medieval manuscript like the Codex Argenteus, and you'll spot the legacy of this innovation. Byzantine emperors adopted the formula for critical edicts, knowing purple ink couldn't be forged or altered without leaving traces. The Vatican's earliest papal bulls used it to signify divine authority, a tradition echoing Phoenician rulers who declared laws in this indelible hue. Even the Dead Sea Scrolls contain passages where stubborn purple letters outlasted the surrounding text, their vibrancy lingering like whispers from the past. But the true marvel was its democratization of permanence. While purple fabric remained a royal privilege, murex ink trickled down to merchants and scholars. Phoenician contracts penned in this ink held up in courts from Babylon to Carthage, their unfading lines resolving disputes decades later. Modern spectrographic analysis reveals its secret. Metal ions in the dye formed microscopic bonds with parchment fibers, creating a fusion of animal, mineral, and seawater that even mold couldn't erode. Today, conservationists studying ancient texts still confront this ink's defiance. Pages crumble around stubborn purple letters that refuse to vanish, as if the Phoenicians embedded their tenacity into every stroke. In a world where digital data can vanish with a power outage, there's poetic irony in ink brewed from sea snails outlasting empires, fires, and millennia, proof that some revolutions aren't loud, but written in stains time can't wash away. Beneath every Phoenician ship's prow lay a silent revolution, an innovation so fundamental that modern navies still rely on its principles, the reinforced keel. This wasn't just a structural beam, it was the spine of maritime ambition, a wooden backbone that transformed fragile boats into ocean-conquering giants. Where earlier vessels wobbled like unbalanced logs in rough seas, Phoenician shipwrights engineered keels with a downward extension, a fin-like protrusion that sliced through waves while counterbalancing the wind's push against the sails. Picture a knife cutting through butter. That sleek, intentional design allowed ships to heel dramatically without capsizing, turning the Mediterranean's notorious squalls from death sentences into mere inconveniences. The genius of this design lay in its multiplier effect. A sturdy keel meant ships could stack cargo higher without fear of toppling. Suddenly, a single vessel could haul 50 tons of olive oil amphorae instead of 20, turning each voyage into an economic powerhouse. Cedarwood ribs attached to this central spine created a flexible yet unyielding framework, allowing hulls to twist slightly in storms. Nature's shock absorber long before the term existed. Archaeologists examining the Marsala Punic shipwreck found keel joints so precise they allowed for expansion when wet, proving these builders understood wood's behavior better than many modern carpenters. But the keel's true test came beyond the Mediterranean. When Phoenician explorers ventured into the Atlantic's violent swells, that reinforced backbone became their lifeline. Unlike the predictable currents of inland seas, the open ocean threw waves from multiple directions simultaneously. Here, the keel's deep profile acted like a pendulum weight, keeping ships upright even when rogue waves battered their sides. With this stability, Phoenician traders reached the tin-rich British Isles and the amber coasts of the Baltic, routes where lesser ships would have shattered like twigs. Modern hydrodynamics reveals why their design was millennia ahead of its time. The keel's shape created a writing moment of physics at its finest. As wind tilted the ship, the weight of the extended keel beneath worked like a lever, pulling the hull back to vertical. This same principle guides today's America's Cup racing yachts, their high-tech carbon fiber keels direct descendants of those ancient wooden masterpieces. Even the Vikings, famed for their nautical prowess, later adopted keel designs suspiciously similar to Phoenician models found in Iberian shipyards. Perhaps the most poetic testament lies in the kelp forests off Cadiz, where local fishermen still call thick seaweed beds the Phoenicians' carpet, a nod to how those deep-keeled ships first harvested seaweed there for glassmaking and dye. 2,000 years later, the legacy of that wooden spine endures, not just in museum models but in every cargo freighter that crosses oceans, its steel hull echoing a design that taught humanity how to dance with the sea rather than fear it. Long before paper ballots or digital voting machines, the Phoenicians and their Carthaginian descendants engineered democracy's earliest safeguard, the ostracon. These broken shards of pottery, etched with names in hasty script, weren't just makeshift voting slips, they were the ancient world's answer to election fraud. Picture the scene in Carthage's bustling agora, citizens queuing to scratch their choices onto clay fragments, each ostracon a physical bulletproof vest against tyranny. Unlike Athenian ostracism, which banished unpopular figures, Carthage's system elevated leaders through these unpretentious shards, blending accountability with accessibility in a way that would make modern pollsters envious. The brilliance of the ostracon lay in its tamper-proof simplicity. No special ink or parchment was needed, just discarded pottery and a sharp stylus. This meant even the poorest fisherman could cast his vote without cost, leveling the political playing field. Surviving examples reveal meticulous organization. Some bear notched edges for stacking, others official seals to prevent forgeries. Historians theorize that election officials used standardized ceramic batches, making counterfeit ostraka glaringly obvious. It was democracy stripped to its rawest, fairest form, where a leader's fate literally rested in the hands of the people holding broken dishes, but the real innovation was transparency. Unlike secret ballots, many ostraka were displayed publicly after counting, creating an enduring record of civic participation. When archaeologists unearthed a cache near Carthage harbors, they found layers of these shards sorted by election cycles, an ancient version of ballot boxes preserved for audits. This system forced politicians to court long-term trust rather than rely on fleeting popularity, knowing their past promises could be dug up alongside pottery fragments. The implications ripple into modern times. Carthage's stability, outlasting many rival states, owed much to this ritual of collective decision-making. Even Rome, notorious for its imperial autocracy, temporarily adopted ostracon, like voting for provincial governors after witnessing Carthage's success. Today, as democracies grapple with hacking risks and disputed results, there's eerie resonance in a system where votes were literally baked in fireproof clay. Those humble pottery shards whisper a timeless truth. Sometimes the most durable foundations of power aren't carved in marble, but scribbled on what others threw away. Every merchant knew the gamble. One storm could erase a lifetime's wealth, sinking ships laden with silk, spices, and silver into the Mediterranean's unforgiving depths. But Phoenician traders refused to let fate have the final say. Their solution, a revolutionary pact where competitors became allies, pooling coins into shared chests to cushion the blow of disaster. This wasn't charity, it was cold, calculated risk management, the birth of an idea so resilient it would outlive empires. At the heart of this system lay the commenda, a contract binding multiple merchants to share both profits and losses. Before a fleet sailed from Tyre or Sidon, contributors would gather at harborside temples, swearing oaths to the god Melkart as scribes recorded their stakes. If a ship returned safely, investors reaped rewards proportional to their shares. But if waves claimed the cargo, the loss was divided like bread at a feast, each participant bearing only a fraction of the devastation. Surviving tablets from Ugarit detail these agreements with chilling precision. Should the sea take the vessel of Adonis, the men of Arwad shall owe 10 shekels per share, no more. The brilliance wasn't just in spreading risk, it was in the incentives. By tying compensation to cargo value rather than fixed sums, Phoenicians created an early version of actual cash value coverage. A merchant shipping rare Tyrian Purple Dye paid higher premiums but received greater compensation, mirroring modern insurance underwriting. Archaeologists have uncovered clay tokens near Carthage that may represent early insurance policies, small discs stamped with ship emblems and numerical values, perhaps carried as proof of coverage. But the real innovation was scalability. These networks expanded beyond individual voyages, evolving into guild-funded safety nets. Port cities maintained communal coffers financed by harbor taxes, compensating any trader who lost goods to pirates or storms. The system grew so reliable that Egyptian pharaohs and Babylonian kings began insuring their shipments through Phoenician intermediaries, trusting these maritime experts to calculate risks better than their own treasurers. Modern insurers still operate on principles those Tyrian traders would recognize. Actuarial tables trace back to their cargo loss records, and general average clauses in maritime law, where all parties share disaster costs, echo their ancient pacts. When a cargo ship today declares general average after an accident, it's invoking a concept literally carved into Phoenician harbor stones millennia ago. The next time you file a claim for a fender bender or stolen laptop, remember you're participating in a system forged by merchants who looked at the sea's wrath and decided to outsmart it together. While other ancient maps depicted seas as vague expanses dotted with mythical beasts, Phoenician charts were works of cold, calculating precision, tools that turned the Mediterranean into a grid of known currents and safe harbors. Their masterwork, the disputed Periplus of Hanno, reads less like a sailor's diary and more like a GPS log. On the third day beyond the Pillars of Hercules, a bay lined with silver-bearing cliffs, fresh water springs at low tide. Every sentence was a breadcrumb trail of actionable intelligence, recording not just landmarks but tidal patterns, prevailing winds, and even the moods of coastal tribes. Modern scholars still debate whether Hanno's voyage reached Cameroon's volcanic peaks or Gabon's mangrove deltas, but the document's clinical detail suggests it was no fable, it was a trade secret written in geography. What set these charts apart was their ruthless practicality. Unlike Greek maps cluttered with philosophical musings, Phoenician scrolls focused on survival. Depth soundings were marked with knots on weighted lines, while dangerous reefs got crimson ink warnings. A trader sailing from Carthage to Sardinia could follow zigzagging coastlines drawn to scale, complete with notations like safe anchorage behind Eastern Headland or avoid sandy shoals after winter rains. These weren't just maps, they were cheat codes for outsmarting the sea. The real power lay in their secrecy. Phoenician captains guarded their charts like state secrets, knowing knowledge of a hidden cove or shortcut could mean monopoly over a trade route. When the Greek explorer Pytheas wanted to replicate their British tin voyages, he had to bribe a Sidonian navigator for scraps of intelligence, and even then received deliberately falsified coordinates. Rome's eventual mastery of Mediterranean shipping came only after capturing Carthage's naval archives during the Punic Wars, where centuries of accumulated Phoenician knowledge became war booty. Yet fragments of their cartographic genius endure. The portolan charts of medieval Venetian traders with their room lines radiating from compass roses eerily echo Phoenician techniques. Even Columbus likely studied copies of their Atlantic sailing directions before his fateful voyage. Today, satellite images confirm startling accuracy in their coastal profiles, proof that those ancient mariners didn't just sketch the world, they measured it one perilous league at a time. Deep in the Phoenician hills, fires burned hot enough to liquefy stone, a heat so intense it unlocked metals hidden within ordinary rock. Their furnaces weren't just clay ovens, they were towering stone cylinders designed to trap blistering temperatures, turning raw ore into gleaming ingots of silver and bronze. Picture a furnace mouth glowing white-hot, fed by bellows pumping air through precisely angled tires nozzles that acted like ancient blowtorches. Where other cultures smelted metals in shallow pits, losing precious material to inefficient burns, Phoenician metallurgists engineered furnaces reaching over 1,000 degrees Celsius, a threshold that separated primitive slag from pure, workable metal. The secret lay in their layered design. Workers stacked alternating strata of charcoal and crushed ore inside the furnace, creating a chemical reaction that forced impurities to rise as frothy slag while dense molten metal pooled at the base. Archaeologists at Sardinia's Monte Suri site found furnace remains with slag still clinging to the walls. Analysis revealed it held less than 5% waste, an efficiency rate unmatched for centuries. This precision didn't just produce metal, it democratized it. Suddenly, a single furnace run could yield enough silver for 500 shekel coins or bronze for 50 spearheads, turning Tyre and Sidon into the ancient equivalent of industrial hubs. But the real innovation was scalability. Phoenician smelters built furnaces in modular banks, allowing continuous production. While one chamber reached peak temperature, workers preloaded the next, creating an assembly line centuries before Henry Ford. A surviving account from the Assyrian king Esarhaddon boasts of capturing 20 furnaces belching smoke in a Phoenician city, each likely producing standardized ingots shaped like ox hides for easy stacking and transport. These weren't cottage industries, they were factories fueling an arms trade that equipped entire armies. The fallout reshaped economies. Mass-produced bronze tools flooded Mediterranean markets, driving down prices until even farmers could afford durable plowshares. Silver extracted from Spanish mines was purified in Phoenician furnaces before being stamped into coins, lubricating trade from Egypt to Mesopotamia. Jewelers in Byblos used furnace-refined gold to craft filigree so delicate it rivaled spiderwebs. A necklace discovered in Carthage twists the metal into grapevine tendrils with individual leaves thinner than parchment. Modern metallurgists still study Phoenician slag heaps for clues about their techniques. The high arsenic content in some bronze artifacts suggests they intentionally alloyed metals to enhance hardness, a practice later adopted by Roman sword makers. Even their waste was valuable. Crushed furnace slag became an early form of concrete, paving Carthage's docks with a material that hardened underwater. Every time you flip a coin or adjust a stainless steel watch, you're handling descendants of those white-hot furnaces, proof that some revolutions aren't fought with swords but forged in fire. Step into the streets of Carthage at its peak, and you'd encounter an amenity most ancient cities lacked, a network of public toilets so advanced even imperial Rome would later copy their design. These weren't dark, foul-smelling pits tucked behind taverns, but sunlit communal spaces with limestone benches perched over flowing water channels. Each seat, carefully spaced for privacy, featured a keyhole-shaped opening that funneled waste directly into the city's underground sewer maze. The real marvel, ingenious gradients kept water rushing beneath the benches at speeds calculated to sweep everything downstream without clogging, a hydrodynamic balancing act modern engineers still admire. The sophistication extended far beyond sanitation. Carthage sewers doubled as storm drains during seasonal rains, their vaulted brick tunnels diverting floodwaters away from homes and into the sea. Excavations reveal clay pipes with sedimentation chambers that filtered debris before it reached main channels, an early version of today's wastewater treatment. Residents could wash their hands at adjacent fountains fed by aqueducts, completing a hygiene ritual that wouldn't become standard elsewhere for centuries. This wasn't just about cleanliness, it was civic equality. Unlike Rome's later elite-focused baths, Carthaginian toilets served all social classes, from dockworkers to merchants, woven seamlessly into neighborhood squares and marketplaces. What truly set the system apart was its preventative thinking. Archaeologists found terracotta warning plaques near clog-prone junctions depicting Bes, the dwarf god of protection, humorously holding his nose, a playful yet effective way to discourage misuse. The sewer's strategic exits into the harbor also created natural flushing currents, using tidal movements to keep the system self-cleaning. When Roman general Scipio Aemilianus finally conquered Carthage, his scribes begrudgingly noted how even during the brutal siege, the city's sanitation systems functioned flawlessly, a testament to planning that considered both daily convenience and disaster resilience. The legacy surfaces in unexpected places. Modern Marseille, built over the Phoenician colony of Massalia, still uses sewer tunnels following Carthage's gradient principles. And those iconic keyhole toilet seats, their design reappeared in Victorian London's public facilities after engineers studied ancient Mediterranean models. Every time you flush without a second thought, you're benefiting from an idea perfected by people who understood that civilization's foundation isn't just grand temples. It's the humble, uncelebrated infrastructure that keeps humanity healthy and thriving. Imagine a world before cardboard boxes or plastic jugs, where every merchant faced the same nightmare: how to move olive oil across stormy seas without it leaking into the cargo hold, or transport wine over bumpy caravan routes without losing a precious drop. The Phoenicians didn't just solve this problem, they turned it into an art form with the amphora, a vessel so perfectly designed that its shape remains iconic thousands of years later. These weren't just clay pots, they were the ancient equivalent of today's shipping containers, standardized, stackable, and engineered to survive the roughest journeys. The genius of the amphora lay in its curves, a narrow base tapered to a point, allowing them to be wedged upright in ship cargo holds or packed tightly in sand for stability during transport. The elongated neck funneled liquids downward, minimizing surface area exposed to air and reducing evaporation. But the real stroke of brilliance was the dual handles positioned precisely to balance the weight when carried, whether by a dockworker hoisting one onto his shoulder or a donkey strapped with a pair on either side. Modern experiments show that this shape could reduce spillage by over 60% compared to open-mouthed jars, a lifesaver when shipping Tyrian Purple Dye worth a king's ransom. Archaeologists have unearthed Phoenician amphorae from the cliffs of Cornwall to the deserts of Mesopotamia, each stamped with symbols indicating its origin, contents, and even the merchant's name, an early form of branding. In Carthage's sunken harbors, divers find these jars still clustered in the skeletal remains of ships, their pointed bases nestled between floor timbers like eggs in a carton. Some held remnants of fish sauce, a fermented condiment so beloved by Romans that amphorae were recycled just for its transport. Others bear traces of resin lining, a trick to prevent porous clay from absorbing expensive wine's flavor. But perhaps the most revolutionary aspect was their modularity. Phoenician traders established standard sizes. The Canaanite jar held roughly 22 liters, while the Carthaginian series could carry 30. This uniformity turned maritime trade into a precise science. A ship's captain could calculate exactly how many amphorae of olive oil would balance against a shipment of grain, optimizing every inch of hull space. When Rome later conquered Carthage, they didn't just adopt the amphora, they industrialized its production, churning out millions in factory-like workshops. The legacy lingers in plain sight. Modern wine bottles still echo the amphora's elongated silhouette, and the very word ampoule for medical vials derives from this ancient design. Even the concept of containerization, shipping goods in uniform units, traces back to those Phoenician jars bobbing across the Mediterranean. Every time you twist open a soda bottle or pour olive oil from a narrow-necked decanter, you're benefiting from an innovation that proved some solutions are so perfect they outlast civilizations. On moonless nights, when even the North Star vanished behind storm clouds, Phoenician navigators pulled out their secret weapon, a humble floating needle that seemed to whisper directions from the gods themselves. Forget the myth that medieval Chinese inventors monopolized the compass. Evidence from shipwrecks and clay tablets reveals these Mediterranean traders were experimenting with magnetic guidance centuries earlier. Their version wasn't the elegant pivoted instrument we know today, but something far more ingenious given their resources. A sliver of magnetized iron balanced on a cork raft, bobbing inside a clay bowl of seawater. Simple, absolutely revolutionary without question. The key to their compass lay in a peculiar black rock hauled from the mountains near Magnesia, a lodestone that naturally attracted iron. Phoenician metallurgists noticed that stroking iron needles along this stone imparted a strange property. When floated, the needles consistently twitched toward the same northern bearing. This wasn't just magnetism, it was a celestial cheat code. Unlike the Greeks, who relied on constellation myths, or the Egyptians, bound to the Nile's predictable flows, Phoenician captains could now navigate through fog banks or sudden squalls with nothing but a trembling needle and their wits. What made their design extraordinary was its adaptability. The seawater in those clay bowls acted as a natural stabilizer. Salinity variations helped compensate for regional magnetic anomalies, while the cork's buoyancy kept the needle level even in rough seas. Archaeologists studying a 5th century BC shipwreck off Cyprus found just such a bowl lodged between cargo amphorae, its interior grooved from years of needle rotations. Modern replicas prove these crude compasses could achieve bearings within 15 degrees of accuracy, enough to keep a course between Crete and Alexandria when every other landmark vanished. The implications rippled across ancient trade networks. With compass-aided navigation, Phoenician ships could venture farther during overcast winter months when competitors stayed docked. One account from Alexandria's library describes a Tyrian captain delivering Egyptian papyrus to Sicily, while the heavens wore sackcloth, guided solely by the iron that licks the north. Even their rivals took note. Greek poet Hesiod wrote of Levantine seamen who converse with stones, likely referencing these magnetic marvels, yet the Phoenicians guarded this knowledge fiercely. Unlike their alphabet or glass-making techniques, compass lore rarely appeared in trade records. Historians speculate they may have spread disinformation claiming the needles pointed toward the god Melkart's heavenly palace rather than revealing their magnetic secret. By the time Chinese compasses appeared in the Han Dynasty, Phoenician traders had already been using theirs to weave invisible highways across trackless waters for generations. The legacy lingers in subtle ways. That cork-floated needle design resurfaced in medieval Arab and Viking navigation tools, suggesting the technology survived in obscure maritime traditions. Today, when your smartphone's GPS flickers out and you pull up a digital compass app, you're tapping into a lineage that began with those ancient mariners who first realized truth didn't always lie in the stars. Sometimes it floated right in front of them in a bowl of salt water. Most harbors in the ancient world were little more than shallow beaches where ships risked grounding with every tide until the Phoenicians reshaped coastlines with surgical precision. Their docks at Tyre didn't just accommodate ships, they defied nature, slicing deep into the Mediterranean with man-made breakwaters that turned wild waves into placid pools. Picture two colossal stone arms reaching into the sea, their curved embrace shielding hundreds of vessels from storms while cranes hoisted cargo directly from quayside warehouses to decks below. This wasn't just construction, it was hydrodynamics weaponized for commerce, setting a standard even Rome's engineers would later copy stone for stone. The secret to their harbors lay in a trifecta of innovation. First, submerged rubble mounds coated in hydraulic concrete, a mix of volcanic ash and lime that hardened underwater, created foundations where none existed. Next, sloping quays allowed ships of any draft to dock at all tide levels, their mooring rings set at precise intervals to maximize space. But the real marvel was the rotating wooden crane, powered by teams of workers treading inside giant treadwheels. These could lift 2-ton amphorae stacks directly from warehouse carts to ship holds, cutting unloading times from days to hours. Archaeologists found grooves worn into Tyre's limestone docks from centuries of crane pivots, each scratch marking millions of tons efficiently moved. What set Phoenician ports apart was their adaptability. At Carthage, engineers designed a circular naval harbor with an artificial island at its center, housing admiralty offices where fleet movements could be coordinated like pieces on a chessboard. The island's radial docks allowed 30 warships to deploy simultaneously, an ancient version of rapid response naval tactics. Even smaller colonies like Motia in Sicily featured innovative moon pool channels that used tidal flows to naturally flush silt from the harbor, maintenance-free. Rome's conquest of the Mediterranean inadvertently became the Phoenician harbor's greatest tribute. When Roman engineers reconstructed Puteoli's docks after 80 BC, they replicated Tyre's layouts down to the width between mooring posts. The iconic Roman corvus, a boarding bridge used in naval combat, was a direct copy of Carthaginian designs. Centuries later, Constantinople's legendary fortified harbor would still echo those curved breakwaters first perfected by Phoenician architects who understood that mastering trade meant mastering the sea's every whim. Modern cruise terminals with their tiered docking systems owe a debt to those ancient engineers who proved even the ocean could be put on a leash. The Phoenician alphabet's 22 consonants conquered the ancient world with ruthless efficiency until Greek scribes stumbled upon a flaw. Those lean, muscular letters could spell baker or brick, but whisper Aphrodite or Odysseus, and the system faltered like a ship missing oars. Where Phoenician thrived on guttural clarity, Greek poetry and philosophy demanded lilting vowels to carry their melodic language, so they did what all great cultures do when borrowing brilliance, they hacked it. 5 Phoenician letters, those representing sounds foreign to Greek, were repurposed as alpha, epsilon, iota, omicron, and upsilon. With this tweak, a writing system born for ledgers became a canvas for Homer's hexameters. Consider the quiet audacity of this transformation. The Phoenician letter Aleph, originally representing the glottal stop in bottle, became Greek alpha, its throaty catch smoothed into an open ah. He, the breathy H in house, morphed into epsilon, stretching like sunlight over the Aegean. These weren't mere additions, they were linguistic alchemy. Suddenly, a trader's notation tool could capture the sigh of Sappho's love poems or the precise arguments of Plato's dialogues. The impact was seismic. Athenian playwrights could now script dialogues with exact emotional cadences, while historians recorded speeches verbatim rather than paraphrasing. But the Greeks didn't stop at vowels. They flipped Phoenician's right-to-left flow to left-to-right, perhaps because their scribes found it easier to avoid smearing fresh ink. They even added letters like phi and psi for sounds Phoenician never needed. Yet despite these modifications, the Phoenician core remained visible like a statue's armature beneath sculpted marble. When archaeologists unearthed the 740 BC Nestor's cup on Pithecusae, its inscription mocking drinkers in crisp Greek vowels, they were holding the hybrid child of 2 civilizations' genius. The ripple effect shaped more than literature. Vowels made Greek mathematics thrive by allowing precise notation of geometric theorems. They let physicians like Hippocrates document symptoms with clinical accuracy. And crucially, they turned writing from a specialist's tool into an engine of democracy now. Assembly decrees could be posted where any literate citizen might read them aloud, vowels giving voice to laws. Those 5 adapted letters didn't just change an alphabet, they wired the ancient world for sound, proving that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin by listening for the spaces between consonants. Before the Phoenicians turned their metallurgical genius to farming, most Mediterranean farmers wrestled with wooden plows that splintered against rocky soil, tools scarcely better than sharpened sticks. Then came a breakthrough as transformative as any purple dye or glass flask, the iron-tipped plowshare. Picture a wooden plow reinforced with a strip of forged iron along its cutting edge, gleaming dully in the morning sun. Unlike its predecessors that gouged shallow furrows before snapping, this hybrid beast could rip through limestone-laced earth like a shark's fin through water, turning barren slopes into fertile strips. The difference lay in the physics. Iron's hardness allowed the plow to slice deeper, exposing nutrient-rich subsoil, while its weight helped the blade self-sharpen against abrasive terrain. Farmers who once spent days repairing broken tools could now plow an entire field before noon. Archaeologists excavating Phoenician colonies in Cyprus found plowshares worn smooth from decades of use, proof these weren't luxury items but workhorses transforming subsistence farming into surplus agriculture. Where a wooden plow might manage one harvest annually, iron-tipped models enabled crop rotation, their durability allowing autumn sowings of barley after spring wheat. But the true revolution was geographical liberation. Phoenician settlers could now farm previously untamable lands, the stony hills of Sardinia, the volcanic soils of Sicily. At Carthage's Biasa Hill, terracing patterns reveal how iron plows turned steep gradients into stepped olive groves, their roots gripping slopes too unstable for traditional farming. These weren't just better tools, they were land-claiming devices, letting colonists squeeze calories from every inch of conquered territory. The economic ripple was staggering. Increased grain yields meant cities could swell beyond local food limits. Tyre's population likely surged once hinterland farms switched to iron plows, their surplus grain traded for Spanish silver and Egyptian linen. Even the plow's design reflected Phoenician pragmatism. The metal strip was riveted, not welded, letting farmers replace just the worn tip rather than the entire implement. Modern agronomists estimate these plows boosted output by at least 40%, a productivity leap unmatched until the medieval heavy plow. Yet the most poetic evidence lies in the dirt itself. Soil cores from ancient Phoenician sites show deeper stratification of cultivated layers compared to neighboring regions, iron's signature etched into the earth itself. When Roman latifundia later dominated Mediterranean agriculture, they used plows derived from captured Carthaginian models, spreading the technology across continents. Today, that ironclad innovation lives on every tractor's steel plowshare, its lineage tracing back to farmers who first proved that feeding civilizations begins not with seeds, but with the blade that prepares the ground. Beneath the smoky haze of Phoenician coastal workshops lay a black, sticky treasure more valuable than gold for seafaring empires: tar. But this wasn't just any tar. It was a meticulously refined marvel extracted from pine resin through a process so efficient that modern chemists still admire its ingenuity. Picture great clay retorts, ovens shaped like inverted bells where workers packed resin-rich pine logs and slowly roasted them over smoldering fires. As the resin melted, it dripped through woven reed filters into collecting pots below, leaving impurities behind. The result, a viscous, waterproofing elixir that would seal hulls against the Mediterranean's relentless waves and revolutionize shipbuilding from Tyre to Athens. The genius of this technique wasn't just in production, it was in application. Phoenician shipwrights didn't merely smear tar on hulls, they engineered layered defenses. First, cedar planks were joined with mortise and tenon joints. Then seams were caulked with hemp fibers soaked in hot tar. Finally, the entire hull received a glossy coat that repelled water while deterring shipworms, a triple-locked shield against the sea. When Greek historian Herodotus described Phoenician ships as black-hulled nightmares, he was witnessing the legacy of this tar-clad armor. The same ships that carried Tyrian purple to Egypt could now survive Atlantic gales, their hulls flexing like living skin without a single leak. But the true testament to Phoenician tar supremacy came through Roman imitation. When Rome absorbed Carthage territories, they didn't just confiscate ships, they commandeered the tar pits of coastal Iberia, where Phoenician colonists had replicated their homeland's methods. Legion engineers tasked with building roads to span continents quickly realized tar's binding power could outlast traditional lime mortar. The via appears most durable stretches. Those where crushed stone was mixed with Phoenician-inspired tar, creating a surface that shrugged off centuries of chariot wheels. Even the word tar itself may derive from the Phoenician term kitter, whispered across millennia in the asphalt of modern highways. Archaeologists have found tar-lined amphorae in shipwrecks off Malta, still watertight after 2,000 years, silent witnesses to a technology that conquered the ancient world's two great frontiers, sea and land. Today, when tankers coated in epoxy resins cross oceans or asphalt highways stitch cities together, they're following a recipe first perfected by those who understood that progress often begins with something as humble as a drip of pine resin transformed by fire. In the shadowy corners of Phoenician workshops, wooden frames stood like silent sentinels, vertical looms that transformed simple threads into fabrics so exquisite, they became the ancient world's currency of power. Unlike the clunky horizontal looms used by neighboring cultures, Phoenician weavers engineered a towering design that let them work faster and with far more precision. Picture a slender wooden frame stretching taller than a person, weighted threads hanging taut like harp strings, while nimble fingers darted between them, interlacing dyed wool into intricate patterns. This wasn't just weaving, it was a mechanical ballet, a choreography of efficiency that could produce cloth 3 times faster than older methods. The secret to their loom's dominance lay in its gravity-fed tension. Weavers threaded warp strands vertically, attaching small clay weights to the bottom to keep fibers perfectly aligned. This simple innovation eliminated tangling and allowed for tighter, more consistent weaving, critical when working with precious Tyrian purple wool, where a single flawed row could slash a fabric's value by half. Archaeologists excavating Sidon's textile district found hundreds of these loom weights, each stamped with workshop marks, suggesting an almost industrial level of production. Some weights were even customized, lighter for delicate veils, heavier for the dense tapestries that adorned Assyrian palaces, but speed and quality were only half the story. Phoenician looms birthed a revolution in design versatility. Their vertical setup made it easier to weave complex patterns, including the famed Phoenician stitch, a looping technique that created fabrics with a sheen mimicking silk. Surviving fragments from Egyptian tombs revealed checkerboard designs and spiraling vines woven with such precision they appear painted. These weren't just textiles, they were wearable art, status symbols that traveled farther than the ships carrying them. A single bolt of purple-dyed wool from Tyre could fetch the price of a small vineyard in Babylon, while sheer linen woven on these looms became the haute couture of Persian nobility. The true genius, though, lay in how they scaled this craft. Phoenician workshops functioned like early factories, with looms arranged in long rows where apprentices prepped threads while masters worked the patterns. Dyers operated nearby, ensuring freshly colored wool could move straight to the weavers without drying out. An ancient just-in-time production line. When Rome later described Carthage textile warehouses as endless galleries of rainbows, they were glimpsing the legacy of this system. Even the famed togas of Roman senators owed their crisp drape to weaving techniques refined on those vertical looms centuries earlier. Perhaps the most telling evidence of their impact lies not in fabric remnants but in legal scrolls. Assyrian trade tablets detail harsh penalties for anyone caught smuggling Phoenician loom designs out of Tyre, proof that in an era of glass-blowing and shipbuilding, textile machinery ranked among their most fiercely guarded secrets. Today, when high-speed industrial looms produce fabrics in minutes, they're unwitting heirs to a technology that proved innovation isn't always about inventing something new. Sometimes it's about turning the whole system on its end. Buried beneath the dunes of Ugarit, clay tablets etched with tiny, precise symbols reveal a revolution far quieter than chariot battles or palace coups, the birth of legally binding contracts. These weren't mere receipts scratched in haste. They were intricate agreements detailing shipments of cedar logs to Egypt, loans of silver with interest rates fixed at 20%, even penalties for late deliveries calculated down to the shekel. One particularly vivid tablet from 1300 BC documents a dispute between two merchants over a spoiled shipment of olive oil, complete with witness testimonies and a judge's ruling scrawled in the margins. What seems like bureaucratic minutiae was actually a radical innovation, commerce governed by rules rather than brute force or blind trust. The brilliance of these contracts lay in their specificity. Phoenician legal scribes didn't rely on vague promises, they anticipated every loophole. A typical cargo contract might stipulate that, should pirates seize the ship off a Lashia, the debtor owes half. If storms drown the cargo near Byblos, the debt is void. Seasonal clauses accounted for monsoon delays, while quality standards ensured Cypriot copper arrived unmixed with stones or fraud. Even the tablets themselves were engineered for permanence, sun-dried for daily use, but baked rock-hard when disputes arose, turning into unalterable evidence. Archaeologists at Ugarit's merchant quarter found stacks of these tablets sorted by case status, pending, fulfilled, or in litigation, proof of a system as methodical as any modern courthouse. But the real power wasn't just in enforcing fairness, it was in enabling risk. With standardized contracts, Phoenician merchants could extend credit across continents, knowing a clay tablet in Tyre would hold up in a Cretan court. Ship captains carried copies sealed in clay envelopes, their terms hidden but their authenticity verifiable via cylinder seal impressions. This was the ancient equivalent of venture capitalism. A Canaanite trader could finance a shipment of Spanish tin using Egyptian gold, with all parties confident the law protected their stakes. When King Nikmadu of Ugarit needed to borrow 30 talents of silver, enough to buy an entire olive grove, the contract's penalty clause threatened his vineyards as collateral, a detail that would feel right at home in today's loan agreements. The ripple effect shaped civilizations far beyond Phoenicia. These clay tablets became templates for Babylonian trade laws, inspired Greek maritime codes, and even influenced Roman contract laws' emphasis on mutual consent. One tablet from 1250 BC outlines a partnership where profits were split 60-40 based on capital invested, a business model still used in modern venture firms. Another details an early form of insurance where three merchants shared the risk of a single voyage, prefiguring Lloyd's of London by 3 millennia. Perhaps the most poetic discovery came in 2005 when archaeologists unearthed a broken tablet near Sidon's ancient docks. Its fragmented text records a simple agreement between a widow and a ship's captain. He would transport her late husband's olive oil to Memphis, and in return she promised 10 shekels and my daughter's hand should you return by harvest moon. Beneath the dry legal phrasing lies a glimpse of humanity, the widow's desperation, the captain's opportunity, and the unspoken trust that a slab of clay could bind their fates across treacherous seas. Today, when you click "I agree" on a digital terms of service page, you're participating in a system those Phoenician merchants would recognize instantly, proof that civilization advances not just by grand inventions, but by the quiet certainty that a promise written down is a promise kept. Long before the Greeks named constellations or Babylonians mapped the zodiac, Phoenician star charts were already guiding sailors and shaping celestial belief systems across the ancient world. Their astronomy wasn't just about navigation. It wove the cosmos into commerce, politics, and even religion, creating a celestial framework so influential that echoes of it linger in your daily horoscope. Imagine a Tyrian priest astronomer perched atop a temple ziggurat, tracing star clusters with a bronze stylus onto clay tablets, each marking not just celestial patterns but the optimal months to sail for tin or harvest murex snails. These weren't whimsical myths, they were precision tools linking earthly cycles to the heavens' rhythms. What set Phoenician astrology apart was its brutal pragmatism. While Babylonian star readers focused on omens and Egyptian priests aligned pyramids with Orion's belt, Phoenicians mapped constellations to trade winds and market seasons. The lion-shaped constellation they called Labu wasn't just a celestial beast, it signaled the onset of summer sirocco winds perfect for sailing to Cyprus. The cluster we call Taurus bore the name Alu, marking the season to fell cedar before monsoon rains softened timber. Archaeologists deciphering tablets from Ugarit found meticulous records of Venus's movements correlated with Tyrian Purple Dye batches, suggesting they timed production cycles to planetary alignments believed to intensify color vibrancy. The transmission of this knowledge reveals a deliberate cultural bridge building. When Phoenician merchants established trading posts in Babylon, they brought star charts that local scribes eagerly absorbed, blending them with their own lunar observations. The result, Babylonian zodiac signs like the Great Twins, Gemini, bear striking resemblance to Phoenician depictions of the twin gods Shachar and Shalom, deities of dawn and dusk whose rising marked safe sailing windows. Even the famous Babylonian mole, a pin, tablets considered the first systematic zodiac include Phoenician-derived star names like Kakab-Urku, the copper star, our Polaris, a nod to Levantine copper traders who used it for navigation. Greek adoption of these systems came with a philosophical twist. Phoenician star lore reached Rhodes and Crete through trading colonies, where early Greek astronomers merged it with Egyptian geometry. The Phoenician sea goat constellation, Gyula, associated with monsoon rains, became Capricorn in Greek hands, its agrarian roots transforming into a symbol of ambition. Most tellingly, the Phoenician practice of dividing the sky into 12 equal sections, originally aligned with lunar months between solstices, evolved into the Greek zodiac wheel. A 5th century BC celestial globe from Sidon, now in the Louvre, shows this transition mid-stride. Half the carvings bear Canaanite star names, half their emerging Greek equivalents. The legacy hides in plain sight. Next time you read of Virgo's practical nature or Scorpio's intensity, you're channeling traits first ascribed by Phoenician astrologers who saw Virgo as the harvest goddess Astarte, holding wheat a signal to store grain, and Scorpio as the time to avoid sailing due to autumn storms. Modern astronomy's very vocabulary carries their imprint. The word planet derives from the Phoenician planetes, meaning wanderer, their term for stars that didn't follow fixed paths like reliable Polaris. Perhaps the most poignant evidence lies not in texts but in artifacts. A gold pendant from Carthage depicts Tanit, the Phoenician moon goddess, surrounded by 12 stars, each representing a lunar month in their agricultural calendar. This motif later reappears on Hellenistic coins and Roman mosaics, eventually morphing into the 12-starred halos of medieval Madonnas. The stars those ancient sailors once navigated by didn't just guide ships. They steered the course of human imagination, proving that sometimes the most enduring inventions aren't tools or textiles, but the stories we paint across the night sky. Before the Phoenicians reimagined winemaking, crushing grapes was a messy, inefficient affair. Barefoot workers stomping in stone troughs, losing precious juice to evaporation and contamination. Then came their lever press, a masterpiece of simple physics that transformed wine from a local delicacy into history's first global mass-market product. Picture a colossal wooden beam anchored at one end, its free side weighted down with stones, slowly squeezing a latticework basket bursting with grapes. Unlike brute force treading, this device exerted even pressure, rupturing every last skin without crushing bitter seeds or stems, extracting up to 30% more juice while preserving flavors that would survive months at sea. The genius of this design lay in its modularity. Phoenician presses could be scaled to fit any vineyard's output, from small coastal plots to sprawling inland estates. Excavations at Scepter revealed stone anchor sockets for these presses arranged in long rows, suggesting industrial-scale production. Workers layered grape clusters between woven reed mats inside the basket, creating a natural filtration system that yielded clearer must, the foundation for smoother, less astringent wines. Amphorae stamped from these sites have been found as far away as the Black Sea, their residues chemically matched to grapes grown near modern-day Beirut. But the real revolution was in taste control. By minimizing skin contact during pressing, Phoenician winemakers reduced tannins that caused harshness, creating a product palatable to diverse cultures. Greek traders famously preferred Phoenician vintages over their own, paying premium prices for Tyrian Purple wine, a blend likely aged in tar-lined cedar barrels for added smokiness. The Carthaginians took this further, pioneering flavored wines infused with herbs and resin, a precursor to modern vermouth. Economically, the lever press was a game changer. Where earlier methods yielded enough wine for local consumption, Phoenician presses produced surplus for export, turning every shipment of amphorae into a floating fortune. Roman records from Pompeii's wine shops list Phoenician vintages alongside prices triple those of Italian varieties. Even the Bible's book of Hosea references the wine of Lebanon, likely pressed in these very devices as a symbol of luxury. The legacy lives on in every modern winery. Today's hydraulic presses operate on the same principle: controlled pressure, maximizing yield without compromising quality. When you uncork a bottle of velvety Cabernet or crisp Chardonnay, you're tasting the descendants of an innovation that proved civilization isn't just built on bread and water sometimes, it's the perfect press that makes history. In the hushed corridors of Byblo's elite estates, a soft metallic click would have signaled more than just security. It was the sound of social stratification itself. The Phoenicians didn't just invent locks, they engineered exclusivity in bronze and iron, crafting mechanisms so precise that even modern locksmiths dissecting their designs find themselves nodding in respect. These weren't crude wooden bolts or simple rope ties common elsewhere in the ancient world. Excavations at Byblos revealed tumbler locks with intricately notched keys, some as small as a pinky finger, others as ornate as royal scepters. Each tooth and groove a deliberate barrier against chaos. The genius of these devices lay in their modular complexity. Unlike Egyptian rope seals or Mesopotamian clay boulia, which merely indicated tampering, Phoenician locks actively resisted intrusion. A typical key from the period resembles a delicate comb, its teeth designed to lift specific bronze pins inside the lock chamber. Only when all pins aligned perfectly would the bolt slide free, a principle still used in modern pin tumbler locks. Archaeologists found one lock in a priest's residence near the temple of Balat Jebel with a false keyhole, an early decoy to confound thieves. Another from a merchant's villa had interchangeable cores, allowing the owner to rekey the mechanism simply by swapping a small bronze insert. What elevated these locks beyond mere utility was their role as status symbols. Keys recovered from elite tombs often feature handles shaped like deities or animals, their weight and craftsmanship advertising the owner's wealth. A particularly exquisite example from Sidon depicts the goddess Tanit holding a lotus, the key's teeth hidden within the flower's stem. Temple inventories describe locks so sacred that duplicate keys were stored in separate chambers, requiring multiple priests to unlock storerooms holding Tyrian Purple Dye or gold offerings. The security implications reverberated through Phoenician society. traders could now store goods in urban warehouses rather than hauling them home nightly. Tax collectors used standardized locks on tribute chests, their seals less prone to disputes. Even marital contracts from Ugarit specify which spouse held keys to which storerooms, a tangible reflection of domestic power balances. Modern security owes an unspoken debt to these innovations. When you turn a Yale key in your front door, you're executing a maneuver first perfected by artisans who understood that civilization hinges, quite literally, on the ability to declare, "This space is mine and no other's." The next time a lock clicks shut behind you, listen closely. That sound carries 28 centuries of quiet defiance against entropy itself. Buried in the dusty archives of Ugarit lies a clay tablet that appends everything we thought we knew about early record-keeping, a meticulously ordered inventory of palace olive oil reserves, each entry marching down the page in strict alphabetical sequence. This wasn't just bookkeeping, it was a cognitive revolution etched in cuneiform. While Egypt's scribes jotted down offerings to gods in chaotic stacks and Mesopotamia's merchants scribbled transactions wherever space allowed, Phoenician administrators in 14th century BC Ugarit engineered something radical: predictability. By arranging words according to their starting sounds, Alaf ox before Betu house, Gimlu camel before Doltu door, they transformed chaos into navigable knowledge, creating the world's first known alphabetized system. What makes these lists extraordinary isn't just their existence, but their sophistication. Archaeologists at Ras Shamra unearthed tax records where names like Abaramu always preceded Baliatan, and temple offerings progressed from Kapasu linen to Zabadi, gifts with unwavering discipline. This was no accident. Tablets were deliberately scored with vertical lines to create columns, each item indented beneath the next like a modern spreadsheet. The scribes even developed cross-referencing techniques. One tablet lists chariot parts alphabetically, then directs readers to another tablet organized by repair status. Such precision suggests alphabetical order wasn't just convenient, it was institutional, a bureaucratic breakthrough as impactful as filing cabinets or search algorithms would be millennia later. The implications ripple far beyond dusty storerooms. Alphabetization supercharged legal systems. Law codes could now group related statutes under consistent headings. Traders kept cargo manifests where amphorae of wine sat predictably between bars of copper and dates, slashing the time crews spent searching for shipments. Even religious texts benefited. Ugaritic god lists sequenced deities from Astat to Yam, making rituals easier to rehearse. This was knowledge democratized, no longer requiring priestly memorization when any literate clerk could locate information instantly. But the true testament to its brilliance lies in its persistence. Greek librarians later adopted the system for Alexandria's legendary collections. Medieval monks used it to index scripture, and modern libraries still scaffold civilization on this foundational idea. Every time you scan a bookshelf or scroll a contacts list, you're participating in a system those Ugaritic scribes pioneered. Proof that some inventions don't just organize data, they rewire how humanity thinks. While Roman roads famously conquered continents with their relentless straight lines and layered foundations, the first stones of that imperial ambition were actually laid by Phoenician engineers in Carthage centuries earlier. These weren't mere dirt tracks worn smooth by donkey caravans. Carthage streets boasted precisely fitted cobblestones laid over graded gravel beds, their cambered surfaces channeling rainwater into gutters lined with ceramic pipes. Excavations near the city's circular naval harbor reveal roads 16 feet wide, enough for 2 ox carts to pass comfortably, their edges marked with raised curbstones that doubled as mile markers. The genius wasn't just in the construction, but in the strategic vision. These paved arteries connected docks to warehouses, arsenals to city gates, creating a circulatory system that let Carthage move troops and goods with terrifying efficiency. What set Phoenician roads apart was their adaptive engineering. Unlike Rome's later insistence on straight lines regardless of terrain, Carthaginian builders worked with the land. Surviving stretches along Tunisia's Cap Bon Peninsula show roads gracefully contouring hillsides, their stone surfaces grooved for traction in wet weather a detail Roman roads lacked. Drainage was another masterstroke. Cross-sections reveal layered substrates of crushed pottery and sand beneath the cobbles, preventing washouts during North Africa's torrential rains. Archaeologists even found traces of a primitive tar sealant on some elite routes near the city center, likely derived from Phoenician shipbuilding techniques. The military advantages became obvious during Rome's invasion attempts. While Roman legions struggled to march their heavy siege engines over Numidian dirt tracks, Carthaginian forces could rapidly reposition along their stone highways. Historical accounts describe Hannibal's troops covering 50 miles in 2 days along these roads, an unheard-of pace in the ancient world. The same infrastructure that delivered Spanish silver to minting houses could rush reinforcements to besieged coastal forts, making Carthage territory defensible despite its sprawling nature. Yet the true legacy lies in how Rome absorbed these innovations. When Scipio Africanus finally conquered Carthage in 146 BCE, his engineers meticulously studied the road network before dismantling it. Many techniques, the cambered drainage, the layered substrates, reappeared in Rome's Via Appia and Via Augusta just decades later. Even the famous Roman milestone system appears derived from Carthaginian originals, complete with distance markers to key ports. The difference was scale. Where Phoenician roads served commerce and local defense, Rome weaponized them for empire building, proving that sometimes the most world-changing inventions aren't the ones we remember, but the ones we forget were borrowed. Today, if you walk the worn cobbles of Sicily's Selinunt, a former Phoenician colony, you're treading on stones grooved by thousands of wheels carrying olive oil, iron ingots, and perhaps even Hannibal's war elephants. These quiet streets whisper a lesson. Infrastructure isn't just about moving people or goods, it's about who controls the speed at which history unfolds. Beneath the waves off Sicily's coast, archaeologists uncovered a weapon so fearsome it redefined naval combat for centuries. The shattered bronze snout of a Phoenician warship's ram, its once lethal edges now crusted with marine growth. This wasn't just a blunt battering tool, it was a hydrodynamic masterpiece forged to slice through enemy hulls like a sword through silk. Picture a three-pronged monstrosity of cast bronze, each tine sharpened to pierce oak planks, while the central blade's curved design channeled the force of a speeding galley into a single catastrophic impact. The genius wasn't in brute strength but in physics. The ram's shape turned the ship itself into a guided missile, transferring kinetic energy so efficiently that a well-aimed strike could snap a mast or rupture a hull without slowing the attacker's momentum. What set Phoenician rams apart was their symbiotic relationship with ship design. Unlike earlier cultures that lashed metal spikes to prows as improvised weapons, Phoenician naval architects engineered hulls specifically to wield their rams. The Bireme's reinforced keel and compact frame allowed for terrifying acceleration, while the ram's placement just below the waterline exploited an enemy's most vulnerable point. Survivors' accounts from the Battle of Alalia describe the horror of these attacks. A glancing blow could shear off oars, leaving ships crippled, while a direct hit sent geysers of water gushing through splintered timber. A recovered ram from Athlet, Israel, still bears stress fractures from multiple impacts, proof these weapons were built for relentless reuse, not single strikes. The psychological impact was equally devastating. Greek artists depicted Phoenician rams as sea monsters' jaws, their gaping maws dripping metaphorical blood. By the time Rome adopted the technology for its own fleets, the ram had evolved into a political statement. The massive rostra in Rome's Forum displayed captured Carthaginian rams as symbols of maritime dominance. Yet the greatest testament to their effectiveness came from those who feared them most. When Persian King Xerxes invaded Greece, his Phoenician-built fleet's rams so terrified the Athenians that they deliberately lured the ships into narrow straits where the weapons became liabilities. Modern simulations reveal why these rams dominated ancient warfare. Computer models show their pronged design created multiple fracture points in enemy hulls, while the curved blades minimized rebound force, allowing the attacking ship to disengage swiftly. Naval historians note that Phoenician rams required crews to master an entirely new form of combat, the deepless maneuver, where ships would weave through enemy lines, pivoting to strike sideways with surgical precision. This wasn't chaotic melee, it was maritime fencing with bronze as the foil. The legacy of these rams echoes in unlikely places. Medieval Viking ships bore similar reinforced prows, likely inspired by Mediterranean models, while modern torpedoes mimic the ram's principle of underwater impact. Even the word ram itself carries a double meaning, an animal's weaponized skull and a warship's teeth, proof that some inventions blur the line between nature's designs and human ingenuity. When divers today touch those barnacled bronze relics, they're connecting with a technology that didn't just change battles, it taught humanity how to turn ships into predators. From the alphabet that shapes every word you read to the coins jingling in your pocket, the Phoenicians didn't just invent objects, they built the invisible scaffolding of modern life. These master innovators were the original disruptors, turning sea snail mucus into empires and sand into transparent treasure. Their legacy isn't confined to history books, it pulses in the veins of daily existence. Every time you send a text, lock your door, or check the weather forecast, you're engaging with ideas forged on the shores of Tyre and Sidon 3,000 years ago. What's astonishing isn't just their inventions, it's their mindset. Where others saw barriers, the Phoenicians saw blueprints. A humble pine tree became waterproofing for ships that conquered oceans. Discarded pottery shards transformed into democracy's earliest ballots. Even their failures were visionary. The deforestation of Lebanon's cedars stands as history's first ecological warning, proving how ambition and excess walk hand in hand. Their true gift was interconnection. The alphabet birthed contracts, contracts enabled trade, and trade demanded better ships, each breakthrough fueling the next in a self-perpetuating cycle of progress. Like a stone dropped in water, their innovations rippled outward, influencing Greek science, Roman engineering, and Arab navigation before reaching your smartphone and supermarket shelves. So here's a challenge. Look around. That road you drove on today, its cambered design echoes Carthage's cobblestones. The wine in your glass, its flavor was standardized by Phoenician presses. Even the concept of insurance that protects your home is rooted in those ancient maritime pacts. History isn't just about dates and dust, it's the story of how we got here, told through purple dye stains and amphory shards. Now we'd love to hear your thoughts. Which Phoenician invention shocked you the most? Was it the compass that guided explorers, the astrolabe that mapped the heavens, or something as unexpected as their sewer systems rivaling modern infrastructure? Drop your favorites in the comments, because uncovering history isn't a solo journey, but a conversation stretching across millennia. And who knows, the next time you use a key or glance at the stars, you might just feel the ghost of a Phoenician craftsman nodding in approval.